Right, you may have had the Hello magazine introduction, but I can promise you a bit of Bloomberg interviewing prowess, because it's a great pleasure now to welcome to your session Caroline Hyde, who is the European Technology and Media Presenter here at Bloomberg Television. Please give her a very big round of applause.
Thank you. Michael, a pleasure as always. Wonderful to be here with you all. Wonderful to be at another Seven Hills event and, of course, with Bloomberg. I want to get some audience participation. Not only am I hoping that you're not gazing at me throughout this discussion and indeed at our wonderful panelists, but down on your phones, busy tweeting away, giving your feedback to what we are raising. We know the hashtag, it's out there, of course, for change makers. But I also want some more audience participation now. I want a raise of hands. We're discussing whether tech is responsible. Who here currently thinks that the technology industry is responsible? Please raise your hands if you do. Wow. Well, responsible. If they are responsible, and they are responsible with your, as an industry, do you think they're a responsible industry? Do you think, another nuanced question, do you think that they are currently ethical with your data? No one, not a single person, right? That's what we're contending with. I'm very pleased to now welcome to the floor to join the Right Honourable Matt Hancock is Rosemary Leith. She is the founding director of the World Wide Web Foundation. Please do join me here, Rosemary. Thank you so much. Wow. Feels tide has turned. This is what we are currently addressing, the feeling that technology isn't ethical with our data. Is not proving responsible. Rosemary, this is something you at the World Wide Web Foundation has been discussing for years now, but suddenly everyone seems to be understanding what you're preaching. Give us a sense at the moment where you're seeing technology being responsible.
Well, thanks very much, Caroline. Thanks, Matt, for your words today. I think that tech has really transformed our world, where no one will disagree with this. When we started the Web Foundation in 2009, we had a clear vision. That was to work to ensure a free and open web. At that time, only 20% of the world were on the web. The web was getting stronger, but it wasn't getting more widely distributed. Next year, 50% of the population will be on the web. It's a tipping point, and I wish that we could claim success and go home. But we can't. And your point is, what does responsible tech really mean? So it means access for all. It means open and affordable. But now it also means tackling fake news, challenging algorithms that discriminate, and looking at business models that really depend on harvesting our deep data. That's really what responsible means.
Does responsible mean, therefore, more regulation in this respect, Matt?
Well, in some cases, yes. And the data protection bill is going through the Commons as we speak, and the GDPR allied to it will come into force on the 25th of May. I don't know if anybody has heard of those two in the room, but they will be very big changes. But the hard thing is to balance the need for the open and free web and the amazing innovations and the benefits that they bring with the need to ensure that these things are done responsibly and in a, what for shorthand you call a pro-society way. And I think that there has been a change from a few years ago when the push was all about free and open and more connections, to ensuring that the quality of those, the quality of what we get from this enormous technology is, it works in a way that's good for all. And I think the challenge is to balance those two, and not to kill off the innovation, but also to make sure that it is done in a responsible way.
I mean, Rosemary, you're someone who knows innovation well. Not only are you married to Tim Berners-Lee, who helped found the World Wide Web, you now have the foundation of the World Wide Web that you have, really brought to bear. But also, you are someone who's on the board of plenty of companies. You're helping HSBC, you're helping the National Gallery, so knowing of arts, but notably YouGov. And I think this is really interesting in the fact that you are showing a way to be responsible with data at YouGov already. Is this something you can tell the audience about and how this could potentially be driven forward?
Yeah, at YouGov, we have a different model. We actually own the data. So people give us their data, 4 to 5 million people in 40 countries around the world, but they do so, they're paid for that data. So they're not giving us, we're not using advertising to connect with them to earn revenue, and it's a very different model.
Therefore, when you're trying to balance, Matt, you're saying you need the innovation on one side, this is an innovative way of potentially rewarding people for their data going forward. But what about, therefore, the ethics that you say? Does this need to be something that's embedded within companies? Is this something, when you're looking at artificial intelligence, the ethics within, are you looking at somehow getting people to sign up voluntarily rather than having to weigh in with regulation across the board?
Yes, absolutely. I think that in getting these rules straight now is absolutely mission critical. And I think getting the rules and the frameworks, whether they are laws or whether they are norms and standards that are adopted by industry, where possible worldwide. But I also think we can come. I think we shouldn't resile from doing things nationally if necessary. I think it's mission critical to get these right now, so that we can essentially have an ethical by design approach. As opposed, it's so much harder to reverse engineer a piece of technology that's been built on one philosophical basis. For instance, one that's been built with a relaxed approach, for instance, to privacy. To bring in stronger privacy rules afterwards is so much more difficult than designing architecture at the start that ensures that privacy is respected. And if we think that, since we are now strengthening privacy rules, and that is impacting on anybody who holds sensitive data, in the AI space, where we're much more in the foothills, now is the time to get the ethics right so that we have ethics by design in artificial intelligence. And we don't have the sort of row that we've been having over the last few months in terms of some of the big platforms' privacy concerns. In a few years' time, when suddenly society says, hold on, we need to get the ethics of AI right. We've got to get it right at the start or as early as possible.
I'd like to talk a little bit about a safer internet. And what does safe mean? It means data is secure and privacy is respected. And Matt talked about GDPR and how that's very welcome. I know it's been a huge undertaking for companies. But everyone should have the same high standards, no matter where they live. And we are seeing, you took a great poll of the audience, who trusts tech companies at the moment. And we're seeing different tech policies for different countries. So you might have seen last week, Facebook announced the shift of responsibility for 1.5 billion users. And they moved them from Ireland to California. Those are users from Africa, Australia, Latin America. And why? So they wouldn't be covered by GDPR. Now, Facebook insists that they give all the users the same protections, but they're actively making changes so that they're not obliged to do so.
Is this something that you should be bringing up with the committee of the digital of culture, media and sports should be bringing up with the CTO come on Thursday?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the CTO of Facebook on Thursday. We'll have a lot to talk about. But, and we're seeing, in fact, I'm seeing also a wide range of the social media, the big social media companies. One of the points about a level playing field is that there are now a couple of dozen significant social media platforms operating in the UK. And so it is, hitherto some of the debate has all just been about Facebook and some of the other very big ones. But actually, the question is broader. And we've got to make sure that everybody behaves in a way that is reasonable and safe.
Are those conversations proving fruitful?
Well, the meeting's on Thursday, so I'll let you know.
Executives prior to this.
Well, look, we have a high-quality debate and discussion with the companies.
Right.
That is, I would say this: the quality of the discussion with the social media companies has improved markedly over the last year. There's been a philosophical shift This comes back to the point about safety by design and ethics by design I was making earlier. The big social media platforms were founded on a libertarian principle that governments would cause a problem, please get out of the way, we can be globally connected, that is unambiguously a good thing. And the truth is, for 95% of people maybe, it is a good thing, and the global connectedness is wonderful, and you can do all sorts of amazing things that you couldn't do before. But that isn't true for everybody. And I've talked about moving to liberal values on the net, which means, yes, embrace the freedom, but also stop the harm that also is there that gets in the way of the freedom of others. And Facebook and some of the other big platforms have had this change in fundamental philosophy in a relatively short period of time, 1 or 2 years, as the debate has moved very rapidly. And I think the move in the debate is a good thing. And now the leadership of those companies has moved, and their high-level rhetoric is in a much better place than it was a year ago. And the question is driving that through the organization in terms of actually how they protect people and protect people's data. And in Europe, because of GDPR, there are things that they must do. Yeah. I hope that GDPR becomes is adopted more broadly as well, because any company wanting to trade with Europe has to have GDPR for their European citizens. But clearly there's a lot of work to do to get this to happen internationally.
And these rules, ethics and norms that you've been discussing, of course, become ever more important globally as more and more people get online.
Yes.
And this is, of course, something that the World Wide Web Foundation has really been pushing for, is inclusivity as well, is making the internet accessible. How are you ensuring that at the moment?
Well, one of the things we're working on now is making it affordable. So we have something called A4AI, the Alliance for Affordable Internet, and it has a target of 1 gigabyte of data for less than 2% of monthly income. We work globally on this, and the UN Broadband Commission have just adopted this, and Nigeria and Ghana have adopted it as well. So affordability is key. People have devices, but they can't afford the content. But
is that companies that have to lower their prices? Is that governments that have to subsidize? How does that look?
Well, it's working with governments so that there's not a monopoly on digital providers in specific countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. But what's critical about next year, the 30th anniversary of the web, in 2019, we're going to reach a tipping point where, as I said before, 50% of the world will be on the web. And we're crossing a line. That means that 3.5 billion people may be left behind. Jobs are on the web, education's on the web, the economy happens on the web. So we have to really work to make sure that people are not marginalized. And so next year, that will be our campaign, this 50-50 campaign, which is a critical time for the world.
Talking of campaigning, Matt, you were discussing how skills is so important. And of course, this is something that the government's been looking to ensure that everyone's, as we see the talk of robotics, the talk of AI, the worry about jobs, it is reskilling. How can those in the audience go out and ensure that people are being skilled up in the way? How are you ensuring that everyone is being skilled up in the way that they ought to be?
Well, you've got to take this full spectrum approach. There isn't an either-or between helping people who've never been online before. Mm-hmm. Still around 10% of people in the UK. Those who want to, of that final 10%, there'll always be a couple of percent who don't. All the way through to the very top end of the skill set. So, for instance, we are making it law that just like if you can't read, you can get free training in English. And if you can't add up, you can get free training in maths to a basic level. You'll be able to get free training in digital skills. That's coming into law. So that's dealing with the issue at one end. Mm-hmm. And then at the other, it's about from coding in the curriculum all the way through and making sure we remain an attractive place for the brightest and the best from around the world. So you've got to have a full spectrum response. And when Rosemary talks about 50% of people around the world, it's easy to think that these people might be in sub-Saharan Africa. Actually, there's some in the UK as well, and we can't take whilst we talk about the excitement of all the big positives of the top-end investments and opportunities, and we've got to also make sure that this works for everybody.
Rosemary, does the World Wide Web Foundation have a concern? Matt very eloquently put it. You've got this risk that when you're trying to ensure that there's rules, there is sometimes a concern about innovation. Do you think the balance can be struck?
I do think the balance can be struck, and I want to thank Matt specifically. I think it's critically important for government to work with civil society and to work with tech companies, and you're doing a great job of doing that. It's really, really important. You know, regulation, there's a very big spectrum, from a gentle nudge to a fine to accountability. And I think right now there's a conversation about, and we can see this in other industries as well, you need to stand up to be accountable. Otherwise, we will have regulation, and rules are not such a bad thing to help companies account. And I think also, to Matt's point, education is really one of the most powerful tools that we have. Educating people about data, about making sure that information is more transparent and accountable is really what we can do for people in the UK and globally.
You're both change makers. You're up here on stage. What change can everyone in the audience make to help ensure, from their perspective, that technology is responsible and they're responsible for their technology?
Well, I don't know. It depends what you do. Do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I think as citizens we have a huge responsibility in voting our politicians in, and these politicians have to be people that are cognizant of the power of technology and the power for each and every individual people. So as citizens, taking that responsibility for the web that we want, and that comes in some of our elected officials in the UK and globally.
I changed that question.
Wow,
For
thanks.
you, as our elected government, what change will you promise to make? What will you commit to now to make us a change?
There is a moment, and we can all participate in this to get this right. There's a moment to ensure that the broad rules of the future of the internet capture the amazing freedoms that it brings and the innovation that comes with that, but does so in a way that is safe and protects people. And everybody, I think, ought to engage in that debate so that we can get the rules right, because the UK is uniquely well placed to lead this debate, engaged closely with both Europe and America and across the world. There are different reasons why different jurisdictions find it hard to take leadership in this area, and I think that we have an opportunity to take leadership in this area. But I know, from coming from a tech background myself, that if we in government try to get these things right without engaging in the wider conversation, we won't get that balance right. And so while we will provide the impetus and the broad direction, we'll do it in a highly consultative way to try to essentially define the rules of the road for the online world in the 21st century. It's a really exciting prospect, and it's not going to be easy.
Vote and respond. There's your call to action, people. Thank you. Please, a big, warm round of applause for a wonderful panel. Rosemary, Leith, wonderful to have you on. And Matt Hancock, thank you very much indeed.